Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Q&A with Whitey. Thanks for joining us. I'm interstate at the moment down in, I was going to say sunny old Hobart. I don't know how sunny it is down here at the moment. It is a tad chilly, I can give you that one. So apologies, I'm coming to you from the hotel room here in mighty downtown Hobart. But thanks for everyone for joining us. Today we're going to set all-time records. We have over 960 people registered to join in our conversation today as we talk around what the go is in reading advanced credit report, consumer credit reports. So it'll be a fun, exciting conversation. But for now, same as usual, as always, make sure you got your cup of coffee. One of the perks of actually being in a hotel is they have some great morning tea. This is all sugar-free, low-fat. So, it's all good for my diabetes. We won't worry about that. So, there. Thanks for joining us. And before we get into our topic and conversations today with our guests who's joining us on Q&A, I must say thanks to those that support us all the time, to our great sponsors, for those folks from AAMC, Affordable Staff, ALI, AmFin, Credit Fix Solutions, Early Pay, Finstro, Heartland, Insurance Advisor Net, Notify, OnDeck, OptiPay, Pepper Money, Prosper, Strive Financial, and Trail Book Loans. Thanks to their support, enables us to bring all this content to you free of charge and to do many other things that we need to do for you as our members and for the industry at large. So many thanks to our sponsors. So let's get into this conversation on credit reports. But to do that, I'd like to welcome our guest, Meg from Equifax. Meg, say hello, join us online. How you doing?
Really, really well. And thank you for having me today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us. It's an interesting conversation we're going to have this morning, and one that I think and hope everybody will thoroughly enjoy. Obviously, a lot of people want to hear it. There's a lot of people joining us. But before we go there, I'd like to get to know someone a bit better. So you're obviously there in your role at Equifax, but before you with Equifax, what was your journey to do what you do today? And then we'll talk about what it is you do today. So what's that journey look like for you to, like coming out of high school, did whatever and wound up here sort of stuff? What's that look like?
So when I left school, I actually intended to be a teacher of all things. And I actually went through uni, I taught for a little while, and I realised that teaching was not for me. Probably due to the level of sarcasm that they don't get. But I moved on into the corporate world. I've worked in collections, I've worked in credit, I've worked in travel, retail, and from a corporate perspective, I actually did my first foray into financial services was working at A&P. And I spent some time there working in superannuation and finance investment. Yep. And that's where I found learning and development. And from there, I came into Equifax. I've been here for a really, really long time. It was 20 years in January. And I've been in a learning and development role. So I've been able to see the organisation change. I work with different parties, community groups, as well as our credit providers and our brokers. And I've been able to see the legislation change, how the industry has changed. And credit reporting is actually really interesting. It's quite an interesting topic.
It's interesting you say that you've been there 20 years, because this year is my 20th year being with the FBAA. And although I've been in this industry, I think it's now my 45th year. It's interesting to see how things evolve, because when we talk about credit reports, my head initially goes to the CRAA. Right? Yes. Go way back in the day, it was a very different name, principally the same thing, but see that evolutionary journey as to what's happening in a particular sector over a big period of time is always, to me, quite fascinating. So I think, a lot of us sort of we're in the moment. So we see what it is today and we think about, why can't we do this, or shouldn't this be done better? But people forget there's been a huge evolutionary process to get to where we are today, and there's always more to come. But I always find those journeys fascinating, because it gives you a deeper insight as to the wheres and wherefores that makes up the reasons as to what happens today. So I think it's great. Good, wasn't you? That's excellent stuff. All right. So let's have a talk about, so what is your role specifically today there at Equifax? Let's talk about that.
So I work in our performance and learning team, which is otherwise known as learning and development. I support not only our brokers and our credit providers utilize our services, but I actually support our internal teams as well, making sure that they're up to date with regulatory changes, with product enhancements, new services. And I'm very, very lucky that I'm also able to work with community groups as well, such as financial counsellors. So being able to see this process from, a member of the general public who has just been declined for finance for the first time and not understanding how it works, and being able to educate people on how it works and why it happens the way that it does is actually one of the perks of working in this job.
So very good. So give me a bit of a baseline as to what Equifax does, and then we'll start talking about credit reporting and so on.
Absolutely. So Equifax is actually the largest credit reporting body here in Australia. There are some other credit reporting bodies, so we're not the only one, but we certainly are the largest. The other thing about Equifax is that we are Australian, our history is actually based here in Australia as well. So you made reference to Credit Reference Association of Australia, or CRA reports as they've been called in the past. We are Credit Reference Association. So when people refer to that, that was actually one of our previous names. We've actually gone through a few iterations of brand and name changes, and Equifax is our current branding. Equifax is actually a global organisation. Head office is in the US, but they have a lot of work in not just in the credit reporting space, but around data and analytics and how we're actually moving forward as a society, and how we can help brokers and credit providers make smarter business decisions.
So here's a curiosity of mine. You may not know the answer to this, though. There's no problems with that. How did they construct the name Equifax? Because to me, I see equity, fax, facsimiles, maybe not fax, could be the actual fax, the data. Is there a construct in the name that brought it to what it was, given those iterations of the past?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I actually know the answer to this question.
Don't you hate questions without notice, though?
So Equifax is actually a construct of, and it refers to the equitable distribution of facts. Oh. And that phrase, they constructed Equifax out of that. So it's it's a contraction of that.
Love it. I knew there had to be something behind it. I think that's fantastic. Excellent. All right, let's talk about the subject today, and that's talking about credit reports principally, and also more at an advanced level. But again, I think we've got to sort of start with some of the simplicities to make sure the baselines are right, and then we can sort of build on it from there. So I guess very, very quickly, and I guess we all can say we know the answer to this in part, but why is a credit report important to a broker?
So a credit report is a collection of information about an individual that speaks to that person's credit worthiness. And for a broker, the reason that we want you to pull a credit report is there's a couple of reasons why we want you to do that. We want to make sure that A, you're aware of what's on that credit report before you refer it to the lender. It's going to save you time. It's going to pull out any surprises that your client may have neglected to have told you. Or
oversight is the word. I think
oversight. Okay, great word. So if your client has had an oversight, whether or not that be a debt or a default from the past, or it might be the number of inquiries on the credit report, it gives you the opportunity to review a credit report and be able to tell a story to the lender. So for example, if you've got a credit report and it's got 25 consumer inquiries, that's a lot of credit that they're applying for. And keeping in mind, we actually cannot disclose whether or not they've been successful in that line of credit. We can only see that they've applied for it. Now, most lenders would look at that and go, not quite happy with that, tell me a story. So you're pre-prepared. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you money. Going to give your customer a great customer experience as well if you're able to speak to the credit report and also speak to what the lender is going to be expecting.
Yeah, and also too, I guess there's a natural affinity with all that. As you tell the right story up front, it's going to help the approval process flow through a lot quicker, without the toing and froing of this, that, and the other. And by the way, everybody who's watching from around Australia, feel free to submit any questions you might have. We have some already coming through, but time being available, we'll try and get to all questions as well as the subject matters that we're trying to talk about today. So keep them coming through. That's great. I'll deal with them as we go through the morning. So understanding the importance of it, and I think that's fairly self-explanatory anyhow. Yeah, there's the issue that I've seen over the years where there are variations of access for a credit report, and you may or may not get the right style of credit report. What is the right credit report that you should be seeking when you're doing a loan application? What level?
So your brokers will have access to what we call an Equifax apply access seeker report, utilising probably IQ Connect, and IQ Connect is our web platform.
Yeah.
That because you're acting as an access seeker, which means that you have written consent from your customer and you are working on behalf of your customer, either with their credit reporting information or to obtain credit. It means that you will be given the same amount of information that we would provide the individual themselves if they came to Equifax and requested a copy of their credit report.
Yeah.
Now, the major difference between what you see as an access seeker versus what a member of the general public would see is in the formatting. The information is exactly the same. However, for a member of the general public, we're going to probably be a little bit more, we're going to write the report in what we call plain English. So it's easy to understand. We remove the jargon from it and we try and make it easy and digestible. Yep. With our brokers, we actually give it to you in exactly the same format that your lender will see.
Yep.
So exactly the same information, just in two different formats.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Now, the questions are coming through thick and fast, but I think we'll go through a few more points first and we'll jump into some of those questions. So apologies, I'm looking down. I'm just sort of checking the questions that are coming through. So I guess we've got the whole issue around credit scores, and I think we know what credit scores are and how they impact. But is it right there is still an impact on the customer score when you pull a credit report versus actually it just being a loan approval, for example, or are they basically all intermingled to being the same thing that all impacts the credit score? And what's that look like?
So back in 2014, when comprehensive credit reporting changes came through,
yep.
One of the major changes that was made as part of that legislation was about footprinting for access seekers. So prior to 2014, access seekers or brokers were known as authorised agents.
Yes.
And when you actually went into a credit report, it would footprint and it would be visible to everybody that you'd been in that particular report.
Remember those
and going way back, and it potentially, and sometimes it actually impacted the score or was seen as an inquiry like a credit provider.
Yeah. Post
2014 changes, access seekers no longer footprint on the credit report visible to credit providers. Yeah. We still have to footprint it. So by law, we've got to be able to tag every time somebody accesses a credit report. But for access seekers and brokers, you now footprint in what we call file access. And file access is a part of the file that's actually only visible to the individual or Equifax.
Right.
So going in as a broker doesn't leave visible footprint for other credit providers to see, and it does not impact the score.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's cool. So I didn't know that. I was always, the old issues of past days was minimise the amount of inquiries because you're going to leave a footprint. It's going to impact credit scores. It's going to make other lenders see it go, oh, I'm not doing that because those six people do it and all that sort of stuff. That's a bit of history.
Yep. So pre-2014.
Yep. 2014. Where does the years go? Well, it seems like yesterday.
It seems like only yesterday that I was actually looking at comprehensive credit reporting and actually running webinars for our clients, updating them on all the legislative changes coming through.
Yeah. Yeah, and it hasn't there been a lot of that. So let's talk about that for a sec, then I'll get to some of the questions because they're still coming through. So and I'd like to deal with them because they're very intelligent questions, which is the sort of the purpose of today. It's an advanced level of understandings. But just give us a little background on comprehensive credit reporting, what that means, and then we'll jump into some questions.
So comprehensive credit reporting came into effect on the 12th of March 2014, and it was a piece of legislation that had been in discussions for a very, very long time. And essentially in Australia at that time, we were only one of 2 nations in the world that was still negatively reporting on credit reports and not allowing any positive information to be reported about an individual and their credit account. And I always think back to the fact that New Zealand got there before we did. But when we brought in comprehensive credit reporting, when they were actually writing the legislation and looking at what changes could be made, the one big thing that did come along with that was positive reporting, and that's what we call comprehensive credit liability information. So credit providers are now able to supply us with more in-depth data on credit accounts that an individual has, specifically the account open and close date, the account type, and the account limit.
Yeah.
Credit providers are also able to provide us with what we call RHI, or repayment history information, for an account for 2 years. So this is fantastic for consumers because we can actually now see how many credit accounts you've got, but also are you paying on time as per your contractual schedule? Yeah. So that was the major thing that came into play. The other thing that happened was that we looked at the current legislation and we looked at, well, what is it that we want to do? So when the legislation was written for credit reporting, which was way back in 1990, it was really about what is it that we want credit providers to do? What is it that we want them to share? What is it that we want them to be able to see on a credit report? The changes in 2014 were really how to focus on consumer protection. What is it that we can do to protect or improve the relationship that consumers have with credit reporting agencies and on their credit report? That had a flow-on impact to our credit providers, and it's what we call the compliance changes that came through as of 2014. So things like the obligations on a credit provider before they actually report a default through to a credit reporting body such as Equifax, they went from something like 3 rules to, when I talk about it, 8, 9 steps that they have to take.
Are they taking?
Sorry?
Are they taking them, those steps?
They are absolutely taking them because they absolutely have to. And one of the things that I encourage brokers to do, especially when I'm doing training for any broker, is I will always say to them, familiarise yourselves with the rules for defaulting, because I can guarantee you your client will not know that they had to receive a minimum of 2 notifications before it's reported. And there's lots of obligations around our credit providers. So knowing that and being able to speak to that, especially when you're reviewing a credit report with your client, is actually going to help you and help your client in the long run. Yeah.
So with that, with the reporting of people paying on time, has that played out fairly? Because I remember the discussions of the day were, well, what happens if I get paid on the 18th of the month, but my payment's due on the 25th and it's out of sync with how my money goes? Has that rationalised itself out, or is it still a bit of a challenge?
No, actually, it was a hot topic of discussion when they were looking at the legislation, and they were looking at how credit providers would report repayment history. And what I would say to everybody online, if you've got access to IQ Connect, there is a training page on IQ Connect, and all of this information that we're talking about today is available on that page. Now, with repayment history, a credit provider, when they calculate what the repayment status is for that month, has to apply a 14-day grace period.
Yeah.
So if they do the calculation between the due date and the grace period, and if the calculation is done within those days, they must report, if the account is up to date or if the payment is just due, they have to report a 0, which shows that the account is either up to date or within grace period.
Yeah.
So there's, for our credit providers, it's all based on how they do those calculations. Equifax, we literally get back a 0.
Yeah.
Because that's what we report back on a credit report. We get a 0, 1, 2, 3, depending on if it's up to date or if it's behind.
Yeah.
So we will always refer people back if they're disputing the RHI. Quickest way for them to look at that is to go to their credit provider.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm pleased to hear that. Like I said, I've been a little bit removed from a lot of those conversations in the more recent years as I'm focusing more on regulatory and political environments and other sectors of this. But I was always very concerned that inequitable position wouldn't play out particularly well, and it sounds like it has. So that's a good thing, because otherwise people could be very unfairly penalised as something that just was principally outside of their control. I'm going to jump into a few questions I've got here. So apologies, I'm going to look at my phone. Sure. And be at liberty to say, don't know, whatever, we'll work it through, but they just keep coming through. So look, I'm just going to read them in the order I've got them. So they might be slightly out of order of our conversation, but I think it's important. These are the things that people want to know about. Let's talk about them if we are. Are there any insights on the Zip ID closure and switching over to Equifax Fact Finder? I'm not sure where that really plans. It's also prefaced with prices and plans. We're not going to talk about prices and plans today, but are there any insights on that?
I would need to park that question and actually ask some more questions of that person to try and figure out what they're trying to get to. But that's something that if you guys send that through after the webinar, we can certainly look into that for you.
Okay, so whoever asked that question, give us some details and we'll see if we can get an answer for you on that. Can I perform an equity, I keep saying equity, sorry, Equifax credit, it's an old habit, Equifax credit report on a company, and will it divulge PPSR security interests?
That's a twofold question. So for commercial credit, sorry, let me take a step back. So when we talk about comprehensive credit reporting and those changes, we're speaking specifically in regards to consumer credit, not commercial.
Yep.
When we're looking at companies and businesses, we're looking at commercial credit. So as a broker accessing a company or business file, yes, you will footprint on the credit report and it will be visible. You'll also have access to PPSR data, either as a standalone search, or depending on the type of report you pull, you can actually request PPSR data in the same report.
Let's clarify what PPSR is for people.
PPSR stands for the Personal Property Securities Register. So if you think way back to pre-2012, used car sales, you used to do a revs check to make sure that there wasn't any finance pending. Do we all remember that? So what ended up happening was that the PPSA was passed and became effective in 2012. And essentially what happened is we took all these registers which had security interests, which includes revs, and we put them into one big register, which is now known as PPSR.
There was about 8 registers, wasn't there, back in the day?
I believe that in total, it was about 70 federal and state-based registers who were put in together. The only thing that's not included in PPSR is land-based assets. Yes.
Okay. There you go. Wow. All right. So next one I have here is talking about FHI reporting.
Yes.
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 Got any conversations around that? I'm not across it, so I'm a fish out of water now.
So that's in regards to financial hardship indicators and financial hardship arrangements.
Yeah, gotcha.
So in July last year, they finalised what financial hardship could, or how it could be reported on a credit report. So essentially, if an individual is in a financial hardship arrangement with their credit provider and that credit provider is participating in comprehensive credit reporting, the credit provider can now tell us that that person is under arrangement. We can only keep that data for 12 months. And we will have an indicator on the credit report to let you know whether or not there's been a varied contract. So their existing contract has been varied to accommodate for this financial hardship arrangement, or whether or not a new contract was entered into, which takes into account the old debt.
How does that? Yeah, sorry.
No, so that indicator is now available on the credit report. But again, as I said, the credit provider needs to be participating in CCR for us to be able to report that information. So not all credit providers are currently participating in CCR. They may be in testing, or they may be still investigating it. But for those credit providers, such as the Big Four, which it was mandated for them to actually participate, they will be able to report whether or not there is a financial hardship arrangement.
So those indicators are fairly easily read on a credit report in regards to financial hardship?
Absolutely. And again, if you take a look at the documentation that we've got on IQ Connect, that actually takes you through what it looks like and what the codes mean.
Okay, excellent. All right, great stuff. I'm going to continue on with these, so coming through thick and fast. Via Equifax, are you able to do PEPs and sanction searches on borrowers?
Absolutely.
PEP, politically exposed persons?
Yep, absolutely. And that's available through a couple of our services, which we've got available on IQ Connect. For that particular question, I'm actually going to park it because we probably need to have a conversation with them about how they're actually utilising IQ Connect and whether or not that's something as quick as a report or whether or not they're part of a bigger organisation that we can actually find another solution.
Okay, but in principle, the answer is yes, subject to something like that?
Absolutely.
All righty, here's a long one here. Let me read through this slowly for you. Where information appears on a competitor's report, but not Equifax, why is this, and is Equifax working to plug these holes?
So as I said when we started, there are actually 3 credit reporting bodies here in Australia. Equifax is the largest. Most credit providers have what we call a multi-bureau strategy, i.e. they will actually speak to Equifax as well as another CRB, or if not all 3.
Yep.
Is possible, and I know it's possible, that our competitor will have information that we don't. And that's because whoever the credit provider is has chosen to use them and not our services. What I will say is that from a coverage perspective, we have almost, I think it's around 98% coverage of our consumer reporting market here in Australia, and we are the largest coverage for commercial data here in Australia. So what, in my experience, a competitor having information that we don't is usually an anomaly.
Yeah. Do you think, you may or may not be able to answer this, but do you think that the progression of open banking and data sharing will help to smooth out some of those anomalies, or?
It should.
Yeah.
And CCR was another change that we knew would flatten out the landscape. Yeah. But you will always, and the fact is Equifax is a privately owned business. We're actually not state run. We're not a government department, state or federal. So there is no requirement for a credit provider to utilise Equifax. They can actually use any CRB. The question is, why are they using them versus us?
Yeah, it's just interesting because yesterday I presented in front of a Senate inquiry looking at what's happening in CDR and those sort of fields and the progression in industry. Because I see that brokers' market share is a tad over 70% at the moment. I've said since 2016, I said we'd get there. And in actual fact, we have the opportunity to get to 80% market share in originated loans, but that will need tech to drive things. And this is all pieces of the puzzle that need to come together somewhere, somehow.
Absolutely.
Part of that same question from that we started with just saying is who decides in today's digital world that more than 5 inquiries is bad?
Well, that's actually a myth. It's actually a myth. When lenders are looking at inquiries on a credit report, they're not just looking at the number of inquiries that have been made. They're looking at information such as how frequently were they made? Who were they made to? What type of credit did they apply for? Was it unsecured credit versus secured credit? If you were to talk to me, if we were having this conversation 15 years ago, I would say absolutely most of our lenders are looking at how many inquiries there are on file. However, the market's changed and our lenders have become a little bit more scrutinous of what is on a credit report, and they're looking not just at how many inquiries were done, but they're also looking at more information and more detail.
Okay. Cool. Will records be unseen after 5 years on Equifax, including bad records such as defaults or collections?
So we, by law, and the Act is very clear, it tells us how long we're allowed to keep information. Equifax keeps that information for whatever that period of time is, and we actually run a daily file to remove information that should be purged from a credit report, and it's an automated process. Now,
different times for different things, is that correct?
Absolutely. So depending on what type of information you're looking for, so if I'm looking at a default or I'm looking at an inquiry, you're looking at 5 years. If I'm looking at RHI, I'm looking at 2 years. If I'm looking at consumer credit liability information or CCLI, that stays on there for as long as the account is active and we've got information to display. So it really depends. What I would say, and I'm going to give you a specific document here. If you look at, again, in IT Connect and on the training page, there is a document on there called Frequently Asked Questions, and we've actually got those purge timeframes listed in that document.
There you go. Go to the FAQs, folks. Excellent. Hey, whilst we're talking about RHI, we'll clarify the acronym, but what do the symbols A and V stand for? And how do they correlate? Do you know?
A as in Apple and V as in Victor. Beautiful. So we're talking about financial hardship indicators now. So those two actually refer to whether or not the individual has got a varied contract or whether or not they've got a new contract that covers that debt. So V stands for varied contract. The other one tells us that there's been a new contract that's been taken out to cover this particular debt as well. Again, if you're looking at any of those codes, if you're online and looking at the report, you can actually hover over the code and it will pop up and tell you what it means. But again, on the training page, there's a document specifically for RHI, and that will actually tell you what all the codes mean.
It sounds like that's a very important piece that people need to jump into, is on that training page, and a lot of your questions get answered there, but we'll keep pushing through. Does a mortgage loan application bring the same credit impact to one's credit file as an unsecured loan, such as a personal loan?
That's a really interesting question, and it's one that we can't give a straight answer to. When we generate a score for a credit report, it's actually based on the information that's currently on there. And it's what we call a dynamically generated score. We don't house it anywhere. It gets calculated at time of inquiry. And it really depends on all the other information that's on that credit report. So I can't say with confidence that they're seen in the same way. But what I can tell you is that our Genesis data block looks at over 400 different characteristics on a credit report in order to generate that score. And I'd like to keep my sanity by not knowing what those 400 characteristics are.
Well, come on, just rattle them off.
I probably could, but I'm not going to.
I wouldn't. Oh, gosh. But isn't it interesting, though, how, again, if we go back to the golden old days of the CRA or CRAA, none of this technology existed. And so credit reporting has become so much more sophisticated and so much more depth to it compared to any time in history. And in some respects, that's a great thing. In other respects, it's maybe not such a great thing. But at the end of the day, to me, it's all about transparency, the truth. So whether it's good or bad, you need to understand it and get it right. And the data intelligence that's sitting underneath all this is just mind-blowing. Is for me.
It's one of the things that I would call out to your brokers is when you're actually looking at an Equifax supply report and you're looking at the score and trying to figure out what the number means, what I would say to you is ignore the number. What you want to look at is on the right-hand side of the score, there's what we call the key contributing factors. And these are the top 3 or 4 factors that have impacted the score either in a positive or negative manner. That's what you want to look at because that's what's going to be called out at the lender's end as well.
Do the lender look at it?
Absolutely, because they look at that to give them direction on what they should be looking at on the credit report. Now, sometimes it's going to be nice and easy. It's going to say there's a negative impact because it's court action data, which tells me that there's going to be some kind of a writs and summons or some kind of court action that's been taken out. It might tell you that there have been its frequency and frequency of inquiries, which tells me that there's a lot of inquiries on the credit report. Or it might say that, the credit inquiry behaviour is actually a strong indicator because they don't apply for credit a lot.
Yeah.
So that is going to give you much more direction on what you should be looking at on a credit report than what the number is going to be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Question here around buy now, pay later style products. Do they appear on the credit file? And if so, do they create a negative footprint?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Okay.
So it's still a little bit up in the air with buy now, pay later around how they would appear on a credit report, whether or not they're seen as a credit provider and therefore can provide positive credit information, such as repayment history on that account. Yep. It is in the process. I know that there's discussions happening at a regulatory level around buy now, pay later. I'm not too au fait with where we're up to, but I'm more than happy to investigate that and come back to you.
Yeah, all right. Okay. No problems. Now, something I'm not across, but hopefully you might be able to have some sort of answer to this one, is that a number of lenders now are using Equifax's one score as a part of their assessment.
Yeah.
Could that ever become available to the access seeker credit reports?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Equifax One Score is a scorecard that we developed a few years ago. And it was to help with the objection that we were getting from brokers as well as individuals and lenders about receiving different scores. So a broker would receive a different score to what the lender would see, which may have been different to what the individual saw if they were enrolled in one of our scored products, looking at their credit report. The purpose of One Score is to give you a baseline that everybody would see, where the score would be the same. It is available for our credit providers and has been for a while now. I believe the FBAA, we will be switching on One Score for your brokers coming soon. I don't necessarily have a date for you. I'm really sorry, but again, we can take a look at what that date is and let you guys know when it's going to happen.
Coming soon to this space, but yeah, excellent. Excellent. There you go. Great stuff. Thank you for that. Sorry, every time I go to look at a question, another couple come through. Badly moving on the stone screen. A couple of here around repayment history sections and what do the letters C and P mean? It's probably in the meaning area they can hover over, but quick answer to that.
So C stands for closed. So it means that the account has been closed and we're actually displaying the remaining RHI until we have no RHI to display anymore, in which case the account will be removed from the credit report. Yep. P stands for pending. It means that we haven't received the data from the credit provider as yet.
Okay. Thank you for that. Here's an interesting one regarding, and it floats around, I guess, the issues we've all been dealing with data breaches, with the hacks of Optus and the like. The question is here, it states, why can't you update your file when you've had to change your license, or maybe driver's license, due to an Optus breach or the like? Apparently there's difficulties in doing that, or what's the story there, do you know?
So we do, with the breaches that have occurred, yes, Medibank, Optus and Latitude is the latest one that's popped up, is that in some states and territories, individuals can change their driver's license number.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that we won't update your driver's license is because all of your identity data comes to us via credit applications,
right,
and credit providers. So if you were to come to me and say, hi, my driver's license number is incorrect, it's 1234 AM, not AN, we would go, hey, that's a correction. We can fix that. Somebody made a boo-boo, let's make it right.
Okay.
But with the new driver's license number, they enrich onto our database as the result of an inquiry.
So I'd say this is tongue in cheek. So if you want to change your driver's license, go get a loan.
Yeah, pretty much. Or
I say that tongue in cheek.
Tongue in cheek. Look, the other way that you can actually do it is if you know that your credit provider is supplying CCR data. So, for example, if you have got an Amex card, you can actually ask Amex to update your driver's license on their end, because they send us through a file with the most up-to-date information on their ledger. Yep. So that would be seen as updating a current account, identity details, and therefore that's another way that you can get your driver's license number changed.
Yeah, okay. All right, moving on to next. How do we know in relation to credit inquiries whether they are real loans or just inquiries for lenders who do not participate with CCR?
So with inquiries, we're only able to hold that the individual has applied for a line of credit. We're not allowed to hold whether or not they've been approved, declined, or chose not to take up that line of credit. So the fact that they've applied for that credit is what we're displaying, not allowed to display anything else. Yeah.
Okay. Now this one's embedded in legislation, but I'll ask the question how. Is there any change regarding the length of time a bankruptcy, don't you hate that? Where is that bankruptcy stays on the file?
So pre-2014, a bankruptcy remained, an arrangement under the Bankruptcy Act remained on a credit report for 7 years from date of listing, unless an objection had been raised for that particular arrangement. Post 2014, it's almost like they wanted to confuse us, because it took us a while to try and figure out what the time frame was. What I will say to you is, generally speaking, you're looking at 5 years, but it depends on when it was discharged or terminated or whatever status it happens to be, and so we're looking at the date and we're looking at the status. That then determines how long we keep it for. As I said, generally 5 years, but, and again, if you look at that FAQ document, we've actually written it in there. Kind of like the formula to work out.
Sounds like you guys have spent a lot of time in that training area and you've got all the answers there. It's good to hear. Excellent. Is there a standard of what is a good credit score?
Well, it really depends. So Equifax's scores run from a -999 right up to a 1200. Very few people have got a score over 1,000. And it would be easy for me to say that, you know, an average score is 600, because that's where, you know, that's halfway. It really depends on the lender that you're applying for credit with, and what their place is in the marketplace. So to give you a real life example, working with a household rental company. So we know that in Australia, the largest brand, if you wanted to get a TV or a washing machine or a fridge, is Radio Rentals.
Right.
However, there's going to be a percentage of the population that don't meet Radio Rentals credit requirements. So there's a whole heap of other household rental companies who know that they're actually getting, and this sounds really bad, the rejects from the major brand. So they have changed their score to accommodate the customers that they're actually targeting.
Yeah.
So what we would expect from a big bank or an international or regional bank, a big brand bank, would be different to if I'm looking at a second, third tier lender, who are probably going to have a little bit more flexibility in their credit criteria than, let's say, NAB would.
Yeah.
So there's no, I'd like to say that this is that score you should aim for, but there's actually, it depends on what you're applying for and who you're applying to.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Is there, or what is the difference between a one-to-one score and a comp score? Is that compilation score? Do you know what the one-to-one versus comp score?
So on an Equifax supply report, we return up to 3 scores to you.
Right.
One is a comprehensive score, one is a negative score, and one is a Vita score 1.1. So a comprehensive score will take into account all that CCR data, right?
Yep.
So we look at everything that's on that credit report. A negative score will look at everything and will not include CCR data as part of the score calculation.
Yeah.
Vita score 1.1 is our previous product. And what we do is we give you the Vita score 1.1 and the negative, so that it was designed so that it helped credit providers and brokers move from the old scorecard to the new scorecard.
Okay. Good stuff. Fair enough. Makes sense. Hey, this is an interesting question. I won't answer before, so I answer part of this, but during COVID, we had a lot of challenges with people who have always had perfect credit scores, always perfect payment histories, wound up without a job, or one of their partner didn't have a job, so it struggled a bit there. And there was, for the sake of a better term, a bit of a moratorium as to how that was being reported. How has that all played out the back end? Are people that were impacted from COVID that still may be impacted from job losses and so on, has that now evolved into, well, that was then, this is now sort of thing? Or what sort of worked out in that?
So that would probably, that question is probably better directed at lenders and at credit providers who were managing things such as financial hardship applications over that period of time. So what credit providers did over the COVID period was that people weren't working, couldn't pay their bills, couldn't pay their mortgage and the rest of it. And they came up as an industry saying, okay, based on that, this is how we're going to report RHI, repayment history information, to a CRB, so that we're not negatively or overly impacting an individual's credit report and their score. I think what you'll find is that with the introduction of the financial hardship indicator and arrangements in July last year, that it's been mandated. It's now part of their obligations. If they're going to report, this is what it's going to look like, and this is what it means.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. We are starting to run out of time. There's a couple of questions here I do want to get to, and we've got a piece we still need to cover up at the end. So I'm just going to ask a few more here. So apologies if we don't get back to everyone, but what we are going to do is take those questions being asked and we'll circulate them back to yourselves for an answer, then pass that back to the group.
Right.
But a couple of things here. So if an individual becomes a guarantor for a business loan, will this information show on the individual's CCR? If yes, what information will show?
If they're acting as a guarantor for a company or business, it's considered commercial credit.
Right.
So no, it won't impact your CCR, because CCR refers to consumer credit or personal lending as opposed to commercial.
Yeah, okay, so it shouldn't sit there. Excellent. I think we might touch this, but if not, how long would an inquiry that did not proceed stay on a credit report for?
5 years. Again, we only the only thing we're privy to is the person applied for credit.
Yeah.
We're not privy to anything else.
Yeah. We have a question here that's followed on from a comment that we made earlier. The question is, why do lenders tell us that the score matters when we're sort of saying it doesn't? We're saying, I don't know, we're saying it doesn't, but there are other indicators that the lenders are also looking at on that. Was it on the right-hand side or the left-hand side of the screen?
The key contributing factors are on the right-hand side. So what I would say about the score is that the score is used as an indicator for our credit providers and the lenders to what next steps are. So they're going to have what we call a cutoff score, and that is anything below this number, we're probably going to decline. Anything between, and they're probably going to have what we call bands. So if a score is, let's say, between 650 and 749, this is the kind of investigation, this is what I'm looking at. So they're going to, so the score is more of an indicator of what actions they need to take, as opposed to if you've got a score over 650, we're automatically going to improve. They're going to be looking for other stuff.
I guess it also comes back to whatever the lender's credit policy is as to how they view that
Absolutely.
data. So you can present all the data and say, well, from our point of view, this is actually something you need to focus on, probably more so, but not disregarding that. But it then comes back to the lender anyhow and their credit.
Absolutely.
So only so much one can do. I'm going to do one more, and I think this is interesting. What do you do when there is a 10-plus-year-old credit entry that appears on a credit file that even the bank don't have on their system? How do you get that off? Because so the bank's going, we know nothing about it, it's off our system, yet it's still on the credit file. It's probably a rare occurrence.
That's probably something I'd need to look into, because that sounds very unusual. There are some circumstances where we would keep the information for 10 plus years. And we would need to see what type of information it is on the credit report before we could give a clear answer.
It'd be very subject to, very bespoke as such, to the actual individual circumstances. And look, I guess with everything, it's going to happen from time to time, and it's just more of what's the workaround, and I guess that needs personal direct contact there and somebody to investigate it and get a resolve to it, because
absolutely.
Comes a point in time where it can be sitting there and there's nothing to back it. You sort of go, well, someone's got to help us out. So I guess with that, it's probably a good segue to piece we want to finish off on is, where do we go for more information? What does that look like?
So there's a number of self-service options for your brokers to access. And as we've said, you're probably on IQ Connect. So the IQ Connect homepage, from here, you've actually got a couple of places you can actually go to get more information. And we're looking at the last three icons in that dark grey banner at the top. So first of all, before we look at those options, I'm going to click on data maintenance. So data maintenance actually is the ability that you have to actually let us know that something on the credit report is wrong. So whether or not that be identity information, whether or not that be that you've come up with 2 files for your client and there actually only should be 1. You can actually request all of that kind of maintenance via data maintenance, which you've automatically got access to on IQ Connect. I've made reference to our training page, and I'm going to talk about it again. We have an extensive training page on IQ Connect that actually has guides in there and information on how to use our reports. If you're looking at an Equifax apply report for the first time and you want to actually get some guidance walking through that, we've got that available on our training page as well. You also have the product and support page. The product support page, or product help, is really good for you to be able to access. This is going to give you specific information in regards to things like what are the key contributing factors and what do they actually mean, but also giving you access to sample reports as well. If you wanted to look at a report and figure out what is it before you actually run the report, you can do that via our product help page. And last but not least, we have our customer support hub. This was launched a few years ago. This is a hub that you can go into, and it does 2 things for you. One, it's got some knowledge-based articles in there. So you know, what is it that I want to know? Let's see if I can do it myself. The other thing that it's got on there is you can actually make requests through that site. So for example, if you've got somebody who started in your organization or working with you and you want to get them an IQ Connect login, you can do that via Customer Support Hub, and you don't need to wait online calling our contact center. This is also a priority way of getting in contact with customer service as opposed to emailing us. So if you want a quick response, do it via Customer Support Hub.
Excellent. Meg, thank you. Incredibly insightful, and sorry to dump you with a whole lot of questions without notice there, but I think it's very important to do that. They're the things that are on people's minds. That's why we're here in this session with Q&A with Whitey. And I really appreciate you joining us, but also answering all those questions for us. And obviously, there's a lot there that people can access online, and we encourage everyone, that's the place to go to learn more. And thanks so much. Thanks to Equifax.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. All righty, folks, we're done for today. You've got you'll be sent an email with some a short survey and a CPD code for reference. Thanks again to our sponsors. We're back on again on the 18th of May, so don't forget to do that. But thanks to everybody that's been supporting us. We have our Broker Elevate series. It's going around Australia. These are our professional development days, and we've got some incredible speakers, almost like a mini conference all around the country happening. So make sure you register in your state to be a part of our Broker Elevate series, and we're coming up on those very shortly. Thanks again to our sponsors. Thank you for your time, and you take care. Look forward to seeing you next time in May. All the best.